To the guards, she was just another captured pilot with a broken plane. They had no idea their prisoner was about to turn their most powerful weapon into their worst nightmare. The impact felt like the world tearing itself apart. One moment, Captain Anya, Valkyrie Callahan, was wrestling the controls of her crippled Apache. The next, she was being dragged from the smoking wreckage by rough hands. Her co-pilot, Jake, was gone, a memory vaporized in a flash of fire and shrapnel. A searing pain shot through her left shoulder, a ragged souvenir from the surface-to-air missile that had swatted them from the sky. Through a haze of pain and grief, she saw the faces of her captors, grim, weathered men in unfamiliar uniforms. They saw a 30-year-old woman, her fiery red hair matted with sweat and blood, her emerald eyes clouded with shock. They saw a prize. She was thrown into the back of a truck and driven for hours into a landscape of unrelenting gray. The destination was a scar on the earth, a former mining gulag repurposed into a high-security prison, nestled deep within a valley perpetually choked by a cold, damp fog. The architecture was brutalist, all cracking concrete and rusting iron, a monument to despair. Barbed wire crowned the walls like a thorny wreath, and searchlights cut futile beams through the oppressive mist. She was brought before the camp's commandant, Colonel Ivan Morozov. He was a tall, imposing figure with a shaved head that gleamed under the single bare bulb of the interrogation room. A meticulously trimmed gray beard framed a mouth that seemed incapable of a smile, and his eyes were as cold and empty as a winter sky. He circled her slowly, like a wolf inspecting a trapped deer. He picked up her personnel file from his desk, tapping it with an expensive-looking steel pen. Captain Anya Callahan. Call sign, Valkyrie, he read aloud, his voice a low rumble laced with a thick accent. He pronounced the call sign with mocking theatricality. Impressive record. 3,000 flight hours. Distinguished service in hostile territories. But records are just paper. He tossed the file back onto the desk. Here, you are not the Valkyrie. You're just a captive. A broken bird with a clipped wing. Morozov leaned in, the scent of stale tobacco and bitterness on his breath. We will talk. You will tell me about your aircraft's defensive systems, your base's security protocols, your mission parameters. Your spirit, like your helicopter, is broken. It is only a matter of time before you accept this. Anya met his gaze, the emerald fire in her eyes refusing to be extinguished. She said nothing. Her silence was a wall he could not breach. For Morozov, her defiance was a minor annoyance, a predictable stage of the breaking-in process. He saw a woman weakened by injury and loss, a valuable intelligence asset waiting to be stripped. He couldn't see the predator behind the prisoner's eyes. He couldn't see the gears already turning, the cold, precise calculus of an apex aviator assessing a new, three-dimensional battlefield. He saw a trophy. He had no idea he'd just locked himself in a cage with her. The days in the gulag bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of meager rations, chilling dampness, and the ever-present watch of the guards. But for Anya, this was not a period of passive suffering. It was active reconnaissance. Her mind, honed by years of tactical analysis, transformed the prison into a map of opportunities and vulnerabilities. She paced her small cell, not out of anxiety, but to measure its dimensions. She tracked the guards' movements, noting the precise 7-minute gap during the pre-dawn shift change at the western perimeter. She observed the supply trucks, memorizing their entry schedules and the lazy, predictable way the gate sentries checked their credentials. Her engineering background, a legacy from her father who fixed crop dusters and Vietnam-era Hueys back in Texas, allowed her to see the camp's infrastructure with a trained eye. She analyzed the power lines, tracing them to a generator hub near the south wall, a single point of failure. She watched the communications array on the main building, noting its exposed cabling. But her primary focus was on the sky. Twice a day, a menacing shape would descend from the fog-shrouded heavens. A Mi-24 Hind, the infamous flying tank. Its presence was meant to intimidate, a constant reminder of the futility of escape. To the other prisoners, the thumping rotor blades were the sound of oppression. To Anya, it was a symphony of data. She watched its flight paths, recognizing the lazy, predictable patrol loops of a pilot who had grown complacent. She observed its landings at a refueling pad near the northern edge of the camp, a spot chosen for convenience, not tactical security. The ground crew was sloppy, their procedures lax. They never established a proper defensive perimeter during the refueling process. During her second week, Morozov had her brought back to the interrogation room. He tried a different approach, one of pseudo-empathy. "Understand your loss, Captain," he said, offering her a cigarette, which she ignored. "Grief can be a heavy burden. Cooperate, and perhaps we can make your stay here more comfortable." Anya remained a statue of defiance. But this time, she spoke, her voice raspy but steady. "You have a slight tremor in your left hand, Colonel. And you tap that pen of yours 12 times a minute when you're trying to project confidence, 25 when you're agitated. Right now, you're at 20. Morozov's hand froze mid-tap. A flicker of something, surprise, anger, crossed his face before being suppressed. "You think you were observing me?" he scoffed, recovering his composure. "I observe everything," Anya replied, her green eyes locking onto his. "It's my job." He dismissed her, his frustration barely concealed. He was trying to get inside her head, but he failed to realize she was already deep inside his. She had identified his greatest weakness, arrogance. He believed he was the master of this domain, that his prisoners were merely pawns on his board. He couldn't conceive of a pawn that was analyzing the entire game, waiting for the perfect moment to flip the table. The Hind helicopter wasn't just a symbol of his power. It was a piece on that board, and Anya Callahan was about to take it. Whispers were the currency of hope in the Gulag. Through a network of coughs, taps on pipes, and fleeting glances, Anya learned she wasn't the only one planning to leave. The effort was being organized by Master Sergeant Marcus Thorne, a career Special Forces soldier with a bulldog's tenacity and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His call sign, fittingly, was Bulldog. His plan was classic infantry doctrine: create a diversion during the shift change, breach the western fence, and melt into the vast, unforgiving taiga forest. It was a brave plan. It was also a suicidal one. Anya managed to get a few precious moments alone with Thorne in the crowded mess hall, huddled over bowls of thin, watery soup. The air was thick with the smell of boiled cabbage and despair. "Sergeant, your plan is solid," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "You'll get past the wire, but you're thinking in 2 dimensions. Thorne, a broad-shouldered man with a fresh scar bisecting his eyebrow, looked at her with skepticism. "What are you talking about, Captain?" "I'm talking about the Hind," she said, her gaze steady. "Morozov will have it in the air within 10 minutes of the alarm. With its thermal imagers, it'll hunt you down in that forest like dogs flushing quail. Even in this fog, it'll find you. You might last 6 hours. Maybe." The grim reality of her words settled over Thorne. He had considered the helicopter, of course, but as an obstacle to be evaded, not a definitive endgame. "So, what do you suggest?" he grunted, his voice laced with frustration. "We stay here and rot." Anya leaned closer, the intensity in her eyes making the air crackle. "We don't run from it," she said, each word delivered with surgical precision. "We take it." For a moment, there was only the sound of men slurping soup. A young soldier nearby let out a choked laugh of disbelief. Thorne stared at her as if she'd just grown a second head. "You're insane," he breathed. "That's a Russian gunship. Even if we could get close to it, who the hell is going to fly it?" Anya held his gaze, letting the question hang in the air for a beat. "I am," she said simply. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the statement silenced the entire table. Thorne studied her, seeing past the prisoner's drab uniform to the unwavering confidence beneath. He saw the eyes of a pilot who didn't just fly machines but commanded them. His mind, trained for unconventional warfare, began to race, re-evaluating the impossible. The risks were astronomical, but the alternative was a slow death in the forest. He looked at the faces of his men, desperate, tired, but with a flicker of new, wild hope ignited by this crazy pilot. "All right, Valkyrie," Thorn finally whispered, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Let's hear your plan." The planning sessions were masterpieces of covert communication, conducted in stolen seconds and conveyed through a secret language of gestures and coded phrases. Anya was the architect, Thorn the engineer who would make her blueprint a reality. Her knowledge of the Heinz operations was the foundation. "It refuels at 1800 hours, just before the evening patrol," she explained to Thorn's core team, scratching a crude map into the dirt floor of a storage shed. The crew gets complacent. They leave the cockpit unmanned for at least 90 seconds while the ground crew connects the fuel lines. That's our window. The plan was a symphony of deception. It had two movements. The first was Thorn's original idea, now repurposed as a feint. He and a team of 10 men would execute a loud, chaotic escape at the eastern perimeter, the opposite side of the camp from the refueling pad. They would use smuggled shivs to overpower a guard and make a show of cutting through the wire. Morozov's ego won't let him delegate, Anya predicted. He'll personally direct the response. He'll see a conventional breakout and react with conventional tactics. He'll send his ground troops to the east, and he'll scramble the Hind to provide air support. He'll be playing checkers while we're playing chess. The second movement was Anya's. She, Thorn, and a small, hand-picked team of 3 others would use the diversion as cover to move silently toward the northern refueling pad. Their timing had to be flawless, synchronized with both the shift change and the Heinz landing schedule. The night of the operation descended with a cold, biting drizzle that thickened the fog, a gift from the heavens. As the camp's floodlights struggled to pierce the gloom, a sudden shout erupted from the eastern fence, followed by the metallic clang of wire cutters. The alarm blared, a jarring, ugly sound that ripped through the night. Just as Anya had foreseen, chaos erupted. Guards blew whistles, boots pounded on gravel, and searchlight beams swung wildly toward the east. In his command tower, Colonel Morozov watched the scene unfold with a smug smile. The fools. He grabbed his radio. "All units, converge on the eastern perimeter. I want them contained. Launch the helicopter to illuminate the sector and cut off their retreat." The order was his undoing. He was so focused on the fleeing pawns that he never saw the queen moving across the board. While Morozov barked orders, Anya and Thorn's team slipped through the shadows, their movements fluid and silent. They were ghosts in the fog, moving toward the rhythmic whomp 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 of the approaching Hind. They reached the edge of the refueling pad just as the gunship, its landing lights cutting through the mist, touched down with a gentle bump. The gambit had begun. The trap was set. The Me-24 Hind settled onto the concrete pad like a prehistoric insect, its massive rotor blades slicing through the damp air as they spooled down. The pilot and co-pilot, confident and unconcerned, went through their post-flight checks, their silhouettes visible through the armored glass of the cockpit. Just as Anya had calculated, they left the engines idling and climbed out, shouting instructions to the 2-man ground crew who were dragging a fuel hose toward the aircraft. They were completely exposed. "Now," Thorn whispered. His team moved with the brutal efficiency of trained predators. Before the aircrew could even register the threat, they were neutralized, not killed but silenced and bound in the blink of an eye. The ground crew met the same fate. The entire takedown took less than 10 seconds. Anya didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the tarmac, her heart pounding a rhythm that matched the idling turbines. She swung herself up into the Heinz cockpit, the metallic scent of hydraulic fluid and worn leather filling her senses. For a terrifying second, the foreignness of it all threatened to overwhelm her. The instrument panel was a sea of Cyrillic lettering, the controls heavy and unfamiliar. It was like trying to speak a language she'd only ever read about. But the principles were universal. Pitch, roll, yaw, torque, the physics of flight were the same. Her hands flew across the console, her mind a supercomputer translating her Apache muscle memory into the Heinz language. She found the throttle, the collective, the cyclic stick. It was clunky, agricultural compared to her sleek Apache, but it was a helicopter. She could make it dance. Everyone on board. Go! Thorn yelled, shoving the last of the freed prisoners into the helicopter's true compartment. Anya's fingers closed around the collective. She took a deep breath, pushed the throttle to flight power, and pulled up. The massive machine shuddered, groaned, and then lifted from the ground, heavy and powerful. They were airborne. From his tower, Morozov heard the Heinz engines roar back to full power. He frowned, confused. It was too soon. He raised his binoculars just in time to see his prized gunship lift off and perform a maneuver that was anything but standard procedure. It banked sharply, its weapon pods glinting in the floodlights, and turned not toward the forest, but back toward the camp. Back toward him. His radio crackled to life. It wasn't his pilot's voice. It was a woman's, calm, clear, and dripping with ice. Colonel Morozov, the voice said, broadcasting on the command frequency for all his men to hear. This is Captain Anya Callahan. You were right. My helicopter was broken, so I borrowed yours. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Morozov for the first time in his life. He watched in horror as the Heinz nose dipped and a ripple of fire erupted from the rocket pods. The communications tower, his link to the outside world, exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The game board had just been violently flipped. The attack was not an act of random vengeance. It was a surgical strike. Anya Callahan, now at the helm of a flying instrument of destruction, systematically dismantled the Gulag's ability to function. A second salvo of rockets obliterated the main armory, sending a secondary explosion blooming into the night sky. The heavy machine gun mounted on the Heinz chin turret shattered, its tracer rounds stitching fiery lines across the guard towers, silencing them one by one. She was careful to avoid the prisoner barracks, her fury guided by a pilot's precision. The psychological impact on the ground was devastating. Morozov's men, seeing their most feared weapon turned against them, broke and fled into the darkness, their morale shattered. Through the cockpit glass, Anya saw Morozov standing frozen in a shattered command post, a silhouette of impotent rage. She had taken his power, his control, and his pride in less than 5 minutes. She keyed the radio one last time. Consider this my formal resignation from your hospitality, Colonel. With that, she banked the heavy gunship away from the burning camp and dove for the treetops. Flying low, using the terrain masking techniques that were second nature to her, she navigated the treacherous mountain valleys. With Thorn calling out coordinates from a captured map, they flew toward the border, a stolen ghost in the night. Hours later, a bewildered American radar operator received a call unlike any he had ever imagined. Unidentified aircraft. You are approaching a restricted zone. Identify yourself immediately. Anya's voice, tired but triumphant, came back. This is Captain Anya Callahan, flying a captured Me-24 with 13 rescued American personnel aboard, requesting permission to land. We're coming home. The story of the Gulag breakout became a legend whispered in military circles. Captain Anya Valkyrie Callahan was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, but her true legacy wasn't the medal. It was the message she sent. Colonel Morozov was disgraced, his facility abandoned, a monument to his arrogance. Intelligence reports later confirmed that enemy forces developed a new, deeply ingrained fear of capturing American aviators. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Anya Callahan trains the next generation of pilots. She teaches them that survival is not just about evasion, but about adaptation. She teaches them that the enemy's greatest strength can be turned into their most fatal weakness. Have you ever been completely underestimated, only to prove that your true strength was something your opponent could never have imagined? Anya's story is a powerful reminder that the most dangerous people are the ones you dismiss as defeated. The guards who laughed at the broken bird learned a hard lesson. Some birds have talons of steel. If you believe a true warrior can turn the tables in any situation, share this story and comment respect below. Because somewhere out there, someone is being counted out, not realizing they're just one bold move away from using their enemy's power against them. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories.